Hi friends. Recently I have been working on a workshop about plot twists, and I have been, of course, watching and rewatching some movies that have plot twists. One of those was Now You See Me. Now, before we continue with the video, I want you to just take a second and let me know in the comments if you remember what the plot twist is. Or if I say there's a plot twist in Now You See Me, do you know what event, what revelation I am referring to? And now we can continue. Oh, and of course there there are going to be spoilers for the movie Now You See Me in today's video. Funnily enough, I didn't actually plan this, but it turned out really well that today, on the 14th of November, actually Now You See Me 3 comes out. So that's a fun coincidence. But anyway, back to Now You See Me and nothing else, just the first one. So as I was preparing for the workshop, I was also talking about the movies and some of my theories and my thoughts with my husband, and he asked why he seemed pretty surprised that I am including Now You See Me in the selection of movies that I'm talking about. Which I guess makes sense because so now at the time of recording this, the movie Now You See Me has the IMDb score of 7.2, and all the other movies that I discuss in the workshop, like Sixth Sense or Shutter Island, stuff like that, are above 8, have the IMDb score above 8. So in a way, you can see that I think there is a big difference in the actual or perceived quality of Now You See Me compared to the other movies that I mentioned in the workshop. I'm not gonna go into those right now. And when he mentioned that, I remember that I've seen quite a few videos and social media posts and just talk to people who have complained about the movie Now You See Me a little bit and consider it like a box office success, but that's kind of it. Whereas I, for example, really enjoy watching it and rewatching it, but that made me realize that I was actually pretty surprised the first time I rewatched the movie. It made me remember that. And so I asked my husband, okay, but do you know what plot twist I'm talking about? And he was like, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Is it that they were actually the robbers, that they rob a bank? Is that the plot twist? Or I don't remember, to be honest. I don't remember. And the funny thing is, that's exactly the thing that I also remember the most from the first time when I watched the movie. That was the thing that I remembered the most. And then when I rewatched it for the first time, so the second time that I watched the movie, I was actually surprised to see this whole storyline that I virtually practically had no memory of. So yeah, that led me to do some research, very, very professional and structured research, where I just asked around some of my friends and family if they have, first of all, watched Now You See Me, how many times they watched it, and if they remember what the plot twist in the movie is. So if I say, I want to make a YouTube video where I talk about the plot twist in Now You See Me, do you know what is the plot twist that I'm talking about? And the reason I ask that is because I think if I mention Sixth Sense to anyone who has watched it, maybe now younger generations are like already familiar with the twist, but I remember the first time watching it, and probably if you're, my age or older, maybe you remember the first time watching it, and I am willing to bet that you remember the exact moment when the character realizes that he is the ghost, that he's the dead people. He's one of the dead people that the kid is talking to. Or if I mention Fight Club, I think most of us who watched Fight Club, if you haven't read the novel before, remember very distinctly the moment when the narrator realizes that he and Tyler are actually the same person. Well, a lot of spoilers today. But so yeah, that's the reason why I wanted to ask around, because to me, once I saw Now You See Me plot twist, it's actually very, it's a very significant twist. It's a very significant revelation, but for some reason it gets forgotten. And it turned out that that is the consensus among my family and friends. So that was my extensive research into this topic. Yeah, I think there is still a pattern there that most people who watched Now You See Me only once and were perhaps not that impressed actually didn't remember at all the plot twist that I'm referring to. Like, some of them didn't even remember that Mark Ruffalo was in the movie, because if you haven't gotten it now, that's the plot twist that I'm referring to. And the only person that did remember is someone who has rewatched the movie several times. So, that makes sense. But yeah, there has been this pattern of people not really remembering this plot twist. And since I feel like it is a significant plot twist and it's pretty well executed, I think, in a way, we'll get into that. That's why I wanted to dive deeper and explore and find out why that is, like what's going on here. And I'm here to share my, very scientific findings with you. So we're going to dive into the structure of Now You See Me, and we're going to look at what made this plot twist a bit less memorable than perhaps some other plot twists that are also well known. Just to be clear, the movie itself, I think, is fun, entertaining. It was a commercial success. It's very cool and sleek and manages to establish this, really cool atmosphere, as well as having these little tricks along the way that I personally really love. So I'm not here to bash on the movie or criticize it or anything of the sort. I also think it's actually better than most people give it credit for. But where it kind of falls flat, in my opinion, is in establishing the plot twist. So there are a few, elements and aspects of the story structure that I think if you wanted to make a very compelling and memorable plot twist could have been, improved. I wanted to share about that today, not with the intention of being critical, but because I think we can learn about that. Well, and also it's fun to analyze movies. But also as writers, I believe we can learn from that just not even in a way that one thing is correct and the right way to do things and the other one is wrong and you shouldn't do that, but it's just about recognizing, okay, so sometimes you have to make a decision whether you will prioritize the plot twist or the vibes, let's say, the style, the visual style. And then it's up to you what you decide to do with that. And each of them has its pros and cons. So that's that. So first we're going to go through a few points about the film itself, and then in the end we're going to try to see if we can extract some, lessons about writing and screenwriting from our observations. Hopefully that sounds fun. Now, since the topic of today's video is, plot twists and plot twist analysis, I want to touch very quickly on what makes a plot twist memorable and what makes it really have a strong emotional impact, because that's the thing that makes it memorable, of course. And I would say the ingredients of a memorable plot twist are: number one, emotional connection to the main character. This one's pretty obvious. We need to care about this person in some way. Emotional connection also doesn't mean we love this character. We might despise them, we might hate them, we might think they're funny. Anything that just makes us care what happens to them. Then, alongside that, we need a very clear central storyline. So we know what this character's story actually is, so that it's very clear who we are following, what is their goal, what they are trying to achieve, what are the obstacles along the way, blah, 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 blah. Then, of course, in order for a plot twist to be impactful, you need good timing of it. So what matters is the structural placement in the story. Where in the story do you put this plot twist? Because as you will see, I think a lot of people think that plot twists are usually at the end, but that's not always the case. And you can pay attention to that next time you watch a movie with a plot twist, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Then the next element of having a compelling and memorable plot twist is to have the right setup and payoff. Now, this is basically just a combination of having a very clear storyline and also the meaning that the plot twist brings to this storyline, right? So that there is some sort of emotional payoff of the plot twist. It's not just there to shock you blindly, but it brings a new meaning to the story. Now, in Now You See Me, I think we have pretty good, setup and payoff. I do believe that the plot twist brings very interesting meaning to the story, and it has a very clear role in the thematic questions of the movie. And also the fact that it's more towards the end, I think is perfectly fine. It works pretty well wherever it is. Now, the problem comes, in my view, when it comes to having a very clear storyline and a clear protagonist, or, the character that we are following. Who are we following? Which brings us to the first problem, which is, who is this story really about? Now we've been talking for a while. You probably sense what the conundrum of the movie might be. But still, I want to ask you, if you have watched the movie, I want you to tell me in the comments, who is this story about? who is the protagonist of this movie? Because the thing is, when I've been asking people about this, when I asked, so who do you think is the main character here? Who do you think we're following? They were like, oh, it's that Jesse Eisenberg guy, right? It's that guy that was in that Facebook movie. That was one of the answers. And also someone said, oh, it's these four magicians. In other words, not one person answered that we are following Agent Rhodes or Mark Ruffalo's character, which is very understandable because on all the posters and I would say any promo materials for the movie, you can see that the focus is really on Jesse Eisenberg's character, so Daniel Atlas, and the four horsemen, so the four illusionists, the four magicians here. And they're the cool factor of the movie, right? They're all sleek and stylish and they're the tricksters. They're kind of the movie's version of Robin Hood, even though, and I feel like a lot of people don't remember this also, someone is telling them to do this. Someone else is organizing these events. It's not they themselves that are doing that. So if we look at the movie itself, we can see that the story's focus clearly starts with them as well. The movie starts with Daniel Atlas. He is even speaking in voiceover that then transitions into, okay, we can see that he was saying this to the crowd around him when he was performing the card trick. And then we see, I think, Woody Harrelson's character, and then we see the Dave Franco's character, and lastly, I think Isla Fisher's character. I'm not sure about the order of these, but that's irrelevant. These are the characters that we meet within the first 5 minutes of the film. And yes, in all of these scenes, there is this hooded figure that we see for a couple of seconds, but the focus is really not on that figure, and probably not enough because it's not super memorable. And yeah, so they receive these cards and they recognize where they have to be, and they meet there and they get their instructions. Then we fast forward to, I think, a year later, and we see their show where they, rob a bank. And it is only after that, so they rob a bank in Paris. And it is only after that, so it is after 23 minutes of the film that we meet Agent Rhodes. And within the next minute, or even half a minute very soon, we also meet the Interpol agent, Alma Dre. And that is very late. That makes him a side character. It's where, if you remember, Dylan Rhodes, so the FBI, with the help of the Interpol agent, fun fact, there's no such thing as Interpol field agent, but it's okay, it's a movie, it works fine. So yeah, with the help of the Interpol agent, they interrogate the four horsemen about the bank robbing. And this is where the story shifts focus onto Dylan Rhodes, so onto Agent Rhodes or Mark Ruffalo's character. And this is the storyline with the plot twist. So his story of the FBI agent is the one with the plot twist. And it relies heavily on the way that he sees and his opinions of these magicians and the whole shebang of illusionism and magic. And that's very relevant to the plot twist because that's one of the main themes of, the movie, or at least this storyline. It's one of the main themes that that contributes to the effect of the plot twist, because that makes it that much more surprising. The way that he is super cynical and critical towards these magicians, and the way that it's actually the Interpol agent Alma Dre who reads about the magicians and all these tricks, and Lionel Shrike, who of course later turns out to be Agent Rhodes's father. But it's actually the Interpol agent, Alma Dre, who reads about this, and she has this role of kind of convincing him that no, sometimes it's good to leave things unexplained, sometimes it's good to believe, sometimes it's good to take a leap of faith, blah, 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 blah. And his character is much more critical and sees this as a waste of time and sees everyone as charlatans, basically. So that's why it is then that much more surprising when we learn that it is actually him that represents the eye, or this association of magicians, and it's actually him that has been orchestrating the whole thing, because the bank and the Morgan Freeman character and the Michael Caine characters, I'm sorry, I forgot their names. Thaddeus Bradley is Morgan Freeman's character, and Michael Caine, I don't remember. So the rich guy, all of these people and the institutions of like the bank that was robbed, they played a part in his father's death. So this was his way of kind of getting revenge in the most magician-y way possible. It took him a lot of patience and a lot of dedication for it, which is also one of the main themes of the movie, or at least, again, the storyline, and it's one of the topics of discussions between Agent Rhodes and the Interpol agent, Alma Dre. And that's why I feel like this storyline has a lot of, let me say, Nolan-esque elements, right? There are some elements that really remind me of movies like The Prestige or the Dark Knight trilogy, but maybe that's just because of Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine. I don't know, maybe. And it's not on such a deep and intimate level, that's true, but there is something there that is fascinated by the dedication it takes to execute a magic trick. And, there are a lot of conversations about what's the moral side of this thing, Is it good to trick people, to not trick people? People want to believe, people want to hear the explanation, blah, 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 all of these things. I think these are all super interesting. And to be honest, this is what, when I rewatched the movie for the first time, so when I watched it for the second time, I only noticed this storyline much clearer. And I thought, wow, this movie is not as bad and superficial as I thought it was when I first watched it. So that's interesting. And it brings us to the other point, which is style over structure. So why is this storyline so unmemorable? And again, I'm going into the extremes here, right? It's not bad. It's not like it completely sucks. It's just not the thing that you remember the most about the movie. And why is that? I believe it has to do with what I already hinted at, and that is this balance between style and theme, or style and structure, let's say. Because compared to Agent Rhodes, the 4 horsemen, the magicians, are much cooler and, more stylish and exciting to watch. So if you imagine that someone tells you, okay, you can watch this movie about the four magicians who rob a bank and they execute these really cool tricks, versus you can watch a movie about an FBI agent who is hunting down four magicians. There's a very clear, it's not like the second one is boring, but the vibe of it is very different. It would be a very different kind of pitch, right, to the audience about what kind of a movie you're going to see. So I think that's one of the reasons why in the movie, clearly the primary focus is on the stylishness of it, the vibes of it, and that's why we start with the Four Horsemen, and then later we move on to, Agent Dylan Rhodes and his whole story, blah, 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 blah. And the other thing, that this is actually the part of the movie that I am least fan of, or actually not really a fan of at all, is a lot of spectacle elements. And not just in the sense that they create a spectacle, but there are a lot of moments that are very unrealistic, even when it comes to creating these illusions, these magic tricks. And I understand there are actual illusionists in the world, like David Copperfield, that do create this very elaborate, huge, tricks, which is great, good for them. But I think there was just, for my taste, there was too much of that in the movie. And it's really not something that I'm personally interested in. I'm much more interested in the relationships, in the themes, in the rawness, the liveness of the story, as opposed to, when they, for example, when the Four Horsemen, they come to the place where they first meet, and then there's like all the blueprints, and they see the blueprints, they're like in the air, like in some sort of weird futuristic sci-fi movie. That to me is overkill and unnecessary, especially since we don't see for any of that how it's executed. As opposed to, for example, I love the fact when Dave Franco's character is, first you think that he died in the car chase, but actually then it turns out he didn't, because it was all, planned. It was all this elaborate plan, and we see how it was done. We see how it was executed. I love that. My brain loves that. It was this puzzle, and then you see how it was created. You see how you can solve the puzzle. But then there are so many moments that of these like weird technology stuff you can see, with the giant check, and they point the light at it, and then the numbers on the check change. I mean, fine, fine. It's things like that happen without any real explanation. And of course you can say, yeah, it's because they had the help from the eye, and that means they had a lot of money. They were able to afford all kinds of crazy technology. To me, all of that is like this unnecessary fluff that is just around what the essence of the story truly is, which is, in my view, the story of Dylan Rhodes. So personally, I am a big fan of the storyline with Dylan Rhodes and the Interpol agent. And when it comes to the Four Horsemen, I also love the little tricks, like when they explain the car chase thing, or when they trick Michael Caine's character, again, I don't remember the name, when they trick his character into revealing like his mother's maiden name and his pet's name from his childhood and so on, so that they gain access to his bank account. It's things like this that I absolutely love. But then when it comes to some of these things like, putting the cards together and then some light shines through and some door magically opens, this is where I am actually very critical of the movie. But again, also I understand that not everyone is like me, and there are people out there who also like this kind of stuff, so that's great. And the creators of the movie, chose that, and that's great because I guess that's what they wanted to do, and they thought that was the vibe that they were going for. But in my opinion, this is another element. So the stylishness and the spectacleness, these are the two things that also distract us from noticing the plot twist story. So yeah, that's my diagnosis, my analysis of the movie and why maybe the plot twist in it is not as memorable as in some other movies where these things that we were just talking about are slightly different. So let's look at a few writing tips, writing lessons we can extract from all of this, especially if you also want to write a plot twist. And even if not, that's also fine. This can be helpful in any case. Number 1, get clear on who your central character is, especially get clear on who the protagonist of your story is. And check if that's obvious to the audience. Here in Now You See Me, I'm not saying there's the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it, but I do think when you look at it, a bit analytically, you can see that it's not very clear who even the protagonist is, especially because we start with Jesse Eisenberg's character, so Daniel Atlas, and he does have, for the first 20 minutes of the movie, I think we really get the sense that that's the character that we're going to be following and that we're going to be following his story. But then later, we switch to Agent Dylan Rhodes. Second, style and spectacle is great, and if you want to sacrifice structure for the sake of vibes, go for it. You can totally do that. There are plenty of really cool movies and novels out there that strongly prioritize style over structure. However, I believe you can do both. You don't need to sacrifice one for the other. And actually, if you do both, that's going to create an even more awesome story. Because a well-crafted story, a story with very good structure, will create a much stronger foundation, a much stronger basis for the style to really come to life and really have a role in it. It's kind of like it will give all the style and spectacleness a purpose. And I think that's really cool. The best movies have both. And third, for a plot twist to be truly earth-shattering and very memorable, you need to make the storyline with the plot twist the priority. And you need to make it very clear that that's the main story that we are following. Of course, you don't need to do that, but if you want to prioritize the plot twist effect, and this strong effect that the plot twist can have on the audience, where everyone remembers viscerally the moment of the twist, then you need to prioritize that storyline. And like we said in number 1, you need to prioritize the protagonist of that storyline. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it has been helpful or enjoyable or fun. And if you want to incorporate a plot twist in your story, you can check out my workshop about plot twists, and you can also check out the plot twist checklist. This one is for free. It's kind of based on what we've been talking about today, what makes a plot twist memorable, and I will put all the links in the description below so you can find all of that over there. Thank you so much for watching and for being here. Like and subscribe and all of that, and I will see you in the next video.